Okay, next up we have Grant Beevers. He's going to be talking about Blackboard and some mysterious thing called Ali Solutions. What the hell is that?
Great, thank you. Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you. Those that were here yesterday know that I covered a little bit as a precursor for what I'm going to be talking about today. I think many of you, if you've been through the university system, probably in Australia since the late 1990s, there's a pretty good chance you've probably come across Blackboard. We are basically known for our Learn LMS, which is in many of the university systems here and around the world. So you would have probably come across this in that. I think Blackboard's been going through certainly many changes over the last few years in terms of its solutions and what it brings to market. And for those that were again here yesterday, I showed you a number of different solutions that Blackboard does have, and for all of those solutions, we need to be looking at accessibility, and we need to be ensuring that anyone that has an experience with those learning technologies, it's going to be an inclusive experience for them. And certainly, all of the development that we do in all of our products at the moment are really very much focused around really three things: responsive design, mobility, and accessibility. So, anything that we do at Blackboard and any further development that we do in any of our current solutions are all really focused around those three particular items. Yesterday, I alluded to Blackboard Ally, which is some software that we recently released. We have a number of universities around the world that are piloting it and trialling it at the moment. And what I wanted to do today is really more deep dive into Blackboard Ally and hop into a site, into an LMS, and actually show you it working so you get a feel for what it does and how it makes a difference with respect to addressing accessibility in the content within our learning management systems that we have out there. And yesterday I brought up some slides, so I apologise for those that were here yesterday, but I'll bring these slides because I think there are a number that are new here today and certainly on the stream around the challenges that we found that we needed to have a solution for to address. And we've broken those challenges really down into three, and those were the institution, instructors or lecturers, and the student themselves naturally. So I wanted just to spend a little bit of time again just focusing on each of those different stakeholders, if you like, to talk about how we've tried to address the issues that we're finding in many of the institutions that we talk to around the world. Firstly, and I mentioned this yesterday as well, that many universities and colleges and we do have our solutions in many government departments and corporate businesses as well, really don't have any insight how they are going towards addressing the accessibility in their content. Institutions, particularly universities, have a lot of content. They have lots of courses, lots of subjects, lots of programs, lots of other information which they're sharing with students and prospective students and so forth. And a lot of that content is being renewed on a regular basis. And it's very difficult. And many institutions, I'm sure, could not tell you, how they assess themselves against, where they sit on that scale of being highly accessible or not accessible at all. Many of the organisations we work with, though, do have disability services groups in their universities to cater for those students that require content in alternate accessible forms. And typically the process in many of those institutions were that the student will identify themselves to the university will then have a group of people inside the organisation then go about creating accessible formats for those particular students. And then the problem naturally with that is that, that's a lengthy process. Sometimes to produce those resources can take well up to a week, maybe even longer. Typically, to produce multiple versions of those accessible versions can take even a longer time as well. So it's a very menial and manual process to produce that. And then the last box I've got up there, and it's something that we're certainly seeing in the US, probably more than anywhere, but we have heard of cases starting to appear in our part of the world as well, is around the litigious side of this, and students actually taking universities and others to course over not providing them with accessible materials in their courses and so forth. And I spoke yesterday about a bill that's before the US Parliament, the Aim High Bill, which certainly I think some of you are probably aware of at the moment, which we're keeping a very close eye on, which will really change the landscape for universities around the way in which they assess themselves against their materials that they produce for their courses to ensure that they are accessible. And I think we'll see a flow-on of that sort of activity into other parts of the world as well, including our own. From an instructor's perspective, and we've had the ability naturally to speak with many lecturers and instructors and so forth around the world, and pretty much what we hear all the time is that, again, there's a lack of awareness of what I can do as a teacher or a lecturer to ensure that I'm catering for the whole inclusive classroom. They want to do it, they know they should do it, but it's a case of balancing what they have to do with everything else they have to do, the time they have and so forth, to ensure that they are producing those particular materials. There's also a lack of understanding about how their course materials actually do affect students with disabilities, and there's not a really great understanding amongst many instructors and lecturers exactly how it can affect students of different disability types. And so, their ability to be able to then even understand what needs to be created is quite minimal. And then lastly, there's a lack of guidance. Certainly, we're seeing a lot more universities and colleges provide accessibility training for staff and so forth. But at the end of the day, building that bridge between providing training and knowledge about accessibility and then building that into the workflows that a typical instructor has to deal with in terms of both developing course materials and then delivering those materials to students in blended learning environments and so forth, that gap still exists in many organisations. Finally, and probably most importantly from the student perspective, then, because of this process of actually having to identify that you require materials in new formats, and then going off and asking to get those materials for you, there's a process that is quite complex, takes a long time to do, long delays. That's shortening the time that students have to get those materials together to meet their requirements for submitting assignments and so forth. So it's not ideal having that process that takes that time to produce those materials, because it does shorten the time that students have to actually get through their course. It excludes many students, and although we can be developing for certain types of content, there's still a large number of students that don't disclose their disability. And lastly, I suppose, we want this to be an inclusive experience for students. So there's a lot of really great alternate sort of versions of content that able-bodied students could actually take well. And yesterday I gave a really good example whereby indirectly, as a result of providing audio files of documents and so forth, students who wish to listen to those documents on the train, on the plane, wherever they might be, can actually do that and access their materials in a completely different way as opposed to having to read their documents as they typically do. So, where did we start? I mean, at the core of the organisations we certainly work with is the learning management system. So we wanted to provide a solution that integrated very, very tightly with learning management systems that our universities use, because that is the way in which content is organised in many organisations. It's the way that students consume that content. It's the way that lecturers and instructors have to set up their content in those particular environments. And so, our starting point was to develop that, but we wanted to develop a solution for all learning management systems. And so the solution Blackboard Ally goes beyond Blackboard's Learn products, Moodle Rooms, and the Moodle solutions that we bring to market, and is available for integration into D2L, into Canvas, into self-hosted Moodle environments. And then we wanted to go further. So on our roadmaps, we're actually going to be developing Ally for WordPress, for Drupal, for library systems, for publishing systems, and so forth. And we'll start to see a lot of that start to make its way into the landscape in 2018. But for now, our focus is on getting it right for the learning management world. And that's where our integrations currently exist in those particular places. Let's start and work our way through the workflow to give you an idea, and then, as I said, I'll pop in and we'll actually work our way through this through a learning management system. But typically the process is that, you know, a course developer or an instructor will upload their content into their learning management system in preparation for the delivery of their subjects for the semester or whatever that might be. And the LMS controls that. There are workflows inside learning management systems, there are tools inside learning management systems that allow them to construct, you know, various learning experience within that. We didn't want Ally to impinge on those workflows of the learning management system. We wanted Ally to be as invisible as possible to the workflows that already exist within inside that learning management system. And so Ally does that. It sits behind and basically runs invisibly behind the system. So when content is uploaded into the learning management system, Ally basically sits there and scans through all of that content and does its smarts, which we'll talk about in just a moment. When Ally does do the things that it needs to do, it does kind of like two different things. The first thing it does, it runs that content. Well, actually, the first thing it does is identifies the piece of content as a PDF, as a PowerPoint, as an image, as a Word document, as an open office document. They're the main types of content that we're currently scanning for. On our roadmap at the moment for delivery, I think hopefully by the end of this year, if not early in the next year, is WYSIWYG content. So HTML content that's developed in some sort of WYSIWYG editor inside the learning management system, then Ally will start to check for that content as well. And then also on our roadmap for delivery very shortly is then the checking of audio and video content. So as that's loaded in, Ally will run against that. It'll produce captioning for those environments and some other bits and pieces to go with that as well. And we'll be releasing information around that very, very shortly. But the very first stage after it decides what sort of document it is, it then runs it against a whole range of WCAG 2.0 AA guides. And so we have some software in there. I showed, I think, the audience yesterday a whole list of the WCAG 2.0 objectives that it runs that bit of content against to check for all sorts of different things. The second thing it does is then runs it against a whole range of machine learning algorithms. And those machine learning algorithms basically, you know, go through and look at all of the styling, all of the titles, all of the tables, all of those pieces that typically make up that document structure. And as you can see there, it identifies those headings, tables, mathematical formulas, converts other mathematical formulas to MathML. It does a whole lot of really smarts around looking at the makeup of that particular document. Then the output of all of that is then, for the student's perspective, is a range of a number of alternative accessible versions. The very first version that is created as a part of the process is semantic HTML. So normal tables and so forth are converted to semantic tables and normal labels converted to semantic labels, titles and so forth, all into semantic HTML. And that is actually one of the very first alternate versions that we provide to students who wish to have an alternate version. The next thing that it will do, though, is then start to produce, you know, a whole range of other formats, which I'll show you in a second. But we don't get rid of the original document that was uploaded there in the first place. So what we're doing here is leaving the original document in place, but then providing alternate versions that can be downloaded by the student, as you'll see in just a minute. And that's important because we didn't want to, you know, upset the content. There are copyright issues that we might impinge on if we were to you know, completely change what was in that particular original document. And so we don't do that. We leave it in there, and then we provide some other place inside the learning management system, as you'll see shortly, where alternate versions can be downloaded. There's really three parts that then make up this particular process. There is the information that we provide to the instructor about what Ally has found about that content item. There is work, naturally there's the alternate versions that we make available to the student. And then the third part is an institutional focus. We provide reports and reports back to the institution to let them see how they are progressing towards achieving their accessibility goals inside that particular institution. If we look at just from an instructor's perspective, when the instructor actually goes into their content, and you'll see this in a minute, they can click on a graph, and only the instructors see this little graph. And we've made it very simple. It's a traffic light sort of structure, red, yellow, green, to tell them how accessible that bit of content is. And we give it an accessibility score based on the algorithms that it's been through in Ally in the background and so forth. In this particular example, you'll see here, it's identified a document as being untagged. It's given it a 5%. It's in red, so we know that this is a document that's not accessible. There's a bit of work that needs to be done to make this document accessible. And then you'll notice too that we also then have what's this mean and then how to make them. So not only are we telling the instructor and giving them guidance about that document, we're then advising the instructor what that means. What does untagged mean? Why is it important that you provide tagged documents? Then the last part to this particular process is that we provide information to the instructor or the course developer, or whoever has that role of looking after those resources, to how to go about fixing that document up. And that might include us just doing the work for you. So Ally will actually go ahead and produce a whole range of accessible versions automatically, naturally, and we'll show you some of those in just a minute. I think that's the real smarts of this particular solution. But if it's a simple thing like not providing alt tags for images and so forth, then at this point here, an instructor can go in there, drag the replacement document in there with the correct tagging and so forth in it, and then just upload it and replace the original document with that new document. Sorry. But the important thing there is that what we want to try and do is change the behaviour of those responsible for creating the content going forward. Probably my bosses at Blackboard might want not to hear this, but I see a time very much into the future where organisations won't need to rely on Ally to do this work for them. They'll already understand what it means to build an accessible document, and they will do that from the start. And when they actually, if Ally still is in there, they can look at the Ally and they can actually see greens everywhere, 100% accessible, great, I've got a terrific document. And that behaviour just carries on in the continuation of further development going forward. So I think that's what we're trying to aim over time, is to get to that point with the people responsible for building that content in our organisations. The institutional report, provides us with a whole lot of information. I won't go too much into that. I'll show you this in just a minute as we work our way through. So in summary, before I hop in, 3 things: alternate versions, instructor feedback, information about how to fix those things, and then lastly, institutional guidance is about how we're going towards that. Let me hop in and we'll take a look at that in situ. We're going to drag this across, yep. Other way. Bear with me, I can't see it on the screen, so I'll... Now this is my Moodle Rooms environment. Again, I take the comments that came back yesterday about having background video content and not being very accessible. I've got this set up for a demo I'm doing tomorrow in another organisation, so I do apologise. You're absolutely right, but I did some research around this after the comments that were made around background video content and accessibility and not having sound associated with it and so forth. And it's something I've made a note of to go back to my teams and to talk about. If organisations who are starting to use background video content as a means of, making just richer sort of web experiences on sites, how are we addressing that at Blackboard from an accessibility perspective? This is more of a customisation that I've just been playing around with. Let me log in. And I'm logging in as a person who has not clicked in the right box. I'm logging in. Okay, I'm logging in as someone that has 3 separate roles. I think if anyone's familiar with learning management systems, you have a role. You can be an administrator, you can be a teacher, you can be a student. I'm logging in as a person that's got all 3 roles in this particular instance to show you all of those 3 steps that we talked through there before. How are we going for time, Ron? Cool. So here's my courses that are in my learning management system. This is Moodle or a derivative of Moodle called Moodle Rooms that we have. So it might look a little bit different for those of you that are familiar with Moodle. But I'm going to hop into this course on emergency medicine. And Oh, we see a little message pop up to tell me some things. Okay, so here's my course topics over here, and I can drill into my topics and I can see my content as it's lined up. As I said, I'm logged in as a person that has administrator, instructor, as well as student, so I'm seeing all the tools that allow me to edit and add content and so forth, typical learning management system sort of capabilities. But as I scroll down, you'll see that some of these resources actually have little graphs associated with them against the actual item type. These are documents of different descriptions, and I can actually see and automatically see a green or reds and so forth, and see that there's work to be done. Let's hop into this particular document here and click on the graph. Remember, students don't see that graph. They'll see the arrow that you saw in the middle at the end of that. So when this comes up in a second, what we're going to see is, speed has dropped out a little. I'll launch that again. Okay, so what we're going to see in a minute is that, and this is something that's coming in the next few weeks, where a preview of the original document will come up on the left-hand side here, but it's telling me on this side here that the PDF is a scanned document. We see a lot of that in universities, where a document page just gets scanned, it gets uploaded, and basically, as we know, a scanned document is an image document. It can't be read by screen readers, and therefore it's a bad thing. So I can go in here. As an instructor, I'm learning a little bit about what it means to be a scanned document. There's a bit of information I can read through, why I should avoid using scanned documents. So this is that part of behaviour training of the people responsible for building this. We're teaching them why it's important not to use scanned documents as part of this particular process. Then down here it says, can you get hold of an original or text base? So it takes me through a little bit of a wizard to try and fix that particular original document up. And I can work my way through the wizard and arrive at changing the document so the original document now has those fixes and so forth. So that's that first part of taking that particular instructor through the change in behaviour, fixing up the original document in place and replacing it with a document. But what Ally has done in the background, and this is what the instructor and the student sees, is these arrows at the end of each of the resources. And if I click on accessible versions at the end of those arrows, then I'm get presented with a number of accessible versions that Ally has automatically created in the background. It takes about 3 minutes. If I was to go in here and upload a new document, then Ally automatically kicks into play and starts going through, running its algorithms against this and creating all of these alternate versions. Over time, we will add additional sort of versions. These are the main versions that we produce. On configuration, you can choose whether or not you want to turn all of these on for display or not and so forth. Those are things that can be done. But here's the OCR'd PDF of that scanned document. So I'm just going to download that. And with a little bit of luck, it'll be fairly quick. Okay, so it's down here. It's finished. And you'll see now that that scanned document is actually now an OCR document. Okay, Ally did that work in the background really quickly, produce it. Screen readers will now be able to read that particular scanned document, which is pretty cool. So let me just close that one down. Oh, did I just close down? I just closed down my world. Okay, so let me come back. Okay. Hopefully this will take me straight back in. No, it's going to want me to log in again. Apologies for that. Yeah, did you see it before? Yep. Oh, did you? You did too. There you go. Password 2016 for those that missed it. The capital P. I should be changing that after this. So let's go back in. Let's go back down to that asset and get rid of that message again. Go back down to that same asset we were working on before. And let's choose sound version, audio version. Now I've got this currently pointing to our US server. And so for when I download the audio file, you're going to hear it. It's going to be an American, a female American voice. We have integrated Read Speaker at the back end to produce the actual audio files. Richard Ing's going to be talking about Read Speaker this afternoon. Please watch that particular session. But what we've done here is use the Read Speaker technology to convert that semantic HTML document that got produced in the first part of the process into an accessible audio version. So let's download this. I don't think it's a big document, so it shouldn't take too long to download the MP3. It's coming down here now. Well, maybe it is going to take a little bit longer. It'll probably speed up in just a second. We'll see how we go. I did create one earlier and I've got it on a thumb drive, but we couldn't get it on the system, so that's okay. But what will happen is when that MP3 comes down, then it will actually be in an audio format that will read out titles, headers, all of the style parts of it. So, similar to what we saw yesterday in some of the sessions, in Andrew's session yesterday, for those that went to that as well. Then we arrived at hearing an audio file. And the great thing about Read Speaker is that we can determine the voices, the characters, the dialects and so forth in a whole range of different languages. That can be set up as a configuration option. And you might want to provide that particular audio file in a completely different language. So it's actually done the transcription of an audio file into another language and then produce that as well. So we're down. Let's click on that one.
Title. Managing. Begin heading level 1. Managing. Begin heading level 1. Virtual Teams. Begin heading level 2.
And so forth. So that will produce those. And as I said, what we're finding is that those audio files are being used by many other students in the university population as well, which has been absolutely fantastic. So let me just flick back to where we were before and the PowerPoint to finish off. Okay, so I didn't show the institutional report, but look, in the time that we've got, anyone that wants to see that, we can look at that in a minute. But for those of you that are familiar with Moodle, Moodle has a system admin area and it has a reports area. When we go into reports, there's an accessibility link there, and in accessibility, we run the report, and then we can actually see up in the top right-hand corner, you can actually see up there that we've got two lines there. And one is the line that's showing the accessibility of content without Ally, and the green line is the line showing with Ally. And naturally, over time, as we build our courses per semester, the x-axis on that particular graph over there is semesters or months or some other time period. We expect those lines to get closer and closer together as we start to automatically think about building our content as being accessible. So you can see right towards the end of those two lines up there, as they start to merge together, we've changed behaviour inside this organisation to a point that, when Ally has gone through and done its reporting of all of the content, it's found that most of it's pretty much to being accessible because, as I said, we've changed that particular behaviour. The report also then breaks up the actual content into different levels of severeness, if you like, with respect to how accessible something is. So it'll break them up into severe, moderate, and so forth. And what we're finding with organisations when they run Ally on their content in their learning management system for the first time, it's coming up with 50,000 documents need addressing. There's problems, these documents aren't tagged, these images cause seizures, all sorts of reports come up. And to fix all 50,000 documents in a short period of time is a big undertaking. So what we're finding a lot of organisations are doing, they're just looking at the ones which are severe and they're saying, right, they're the issues that we need to fix. And a lot of the severe ones might be around the scanned documents and things like that, because scanned documents are useless to any screen readers and we need to fix those ones and so forth. So organisations then put a plan together to think about, okay, how are we going to go about fixing the things that need fixing, and we'll start with the severes and work our ways down to the minor sort of issues. But it does give you that spectrum to work through to fix up those particular content items. Okay, so like I said, available for a whole range of different learning management systems at the moment. I won't worry about that one. But that's about it. I hope that that's of interest. Those that are very keen to maybe explore it a little bit further, certainly Google Blackboard Ally. There's a lot of information and videos and stuff online as well. And then those that want to look at it in a little bit more detail, certainly come and see me, and I can give you some cards, and we can start talking about getting you access and so forth. But thank you very much.
We've just run out of time. Do we want to squeeze one in? Can we
Squeeze one in.
Yeah, one. Oh, you make a comment? Not allowed.
Hello, Matthew Putland from the Centre for Inclusive Design. Just a quick question on Ali. You mentioned it's coming to LMS systems and possibly WordPress in the future. Will we ever be able to use Ali just on its own? So, yes?
Yes,
So,
yeah, and that's part of that next phase of making it available. I actually came off a call last Friday with the developers of all of this, and that is the plan, is why just those systems? Why not just use it for anything? Throw it against a website, throw it against whatever, and have it report on those sort of things and correct it and so forth. So absolutely, I think we'll see that. I mean, at the end of the day, our focus with our customer base is learning management, and that's where our work has started and being refined. But I think the steps will be that when we start delivering it for the WordPresses and publishing systems, that's when at the same time it'll probably be available for anything, I think, at that point, because I think the same sort of algorithm sits behind that. So, Liddy, did you ever?
No, I'm going to punch
Okay.
Okay, we're going to take a break. We have to be back here at 25 past for our start at 11:30. Thank you again.
Thanks, Russ.